If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We have new stories every day. Let's talk about the golden years. I don't think they'll look anything like this. I'm looking at the dining room at Wagon Wheel Acres. All I see are elderly faces. I'm one of them at 62. I don't want to feel this ancient, but the real kicker is that I'm sitting at a table for 4, surrounded by strangers, while my wife Pamela sits with her friends at the other end of the room. The entire retirement complex chose Wagon Wheel Acres for its continuous care option, and we ended up buying there because it was reasonable. Our combined monthly fees exceed $3,000, promising peace and convenience, yet I never saw this coming. My appetite vanishes as I watch Pamela engage in lively conversation with Robert. I spent 40 years caring for her, and now he's reaping the benefits of her companionship in our twilight years. It's been 2 weeks since Penella confessed her intimacy with Robert and her intent to continue that afternoon. She relocated all her belongings to his studio apartment. Ours may have a bedroom, but it lacks Robert. I've never contested her decisions. I've never had the stomach for it. What does that say about me? Over the years, I found it easier to agree than to confront the situation. I pushed my lunch aside. I was really frustrated. I went to my room and thought about how I was going to pay for my wife to stay here while Robert Nelson enjoyed all the perks. Despite years of trying to make my wife happy, it seemed like my efforts were pointless. It was as if Robert had some secret knowledge that I didn't have. I was thinking about this in the reflection of my bathroom. I saw a business card, one of the more assertive bachelors, and grabbed a cold beer. I sank into my trusty recliner, the only one in the room. It was untouched by time. I took a couple of swigs and looked at the card. It said, Berkshire Escorts by the hour or by the day. I thought, what could a 62-year-old? I couldn't imagine why an old man would need an escort for an entire day. It seemed unlikely that you could get anything out of an hour in an hour. I was in 2 minds about what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to say or do. Maybe I just needed someone to talk to. Berkshire Escorts, this is Richard speaking. I got those words out before I lost my nerve. After a long silence, Berkshire Escorts. Hello, are you still there? Yes, hello, I'm here, I replied, feeling nervous. Richard here. Do you have a question for me? Richard's voice remained steady, offering a reassuring presence. How did you know? Well, most callers usually do have questions. He chuckled lightly. So, you're not psychic? Would you like to share yours? My name's Peterson. Is that necessary? Not really, but it does make conversation easier. My friend Kenneth gave me your card. Mr. Mitchell, are you also over at Wagon Wheel? Yes, is that an issue? Not at all. Why would it be? Kenneth mentioned that you provided him with companions before and he was satisfied. Well, that's good to hear. I might just have to give him a discount next time. I didn't know what to say, so there was a short pause in the conversation. Peterson, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I'm just not sure what to say or ask. Let me help you. How long do you need company for? I think probably an hour or 2. I just need someone to have dinner with, maybe at a nice restaurant. An hour or 2 should be enough. Is that all you're looking for? I'm not looking for anything more than a pleasant companion for a few hours. Is that what you're looking for? It felt a bit awkward, considering Pamela was the only woman I'd ever been with. Peterson, our escorts charge $300 per hour, which is quite a sum just for dinner companionship. I understand when you say young lady. What age range are we talking about? Most of our escorts are under 30, which won't work for me. I prefer women over 50. I'm not really into younger women. I prefer maturity in class. Do you have any suggestions for someone older looking for women in that age bracket? It's a bit challenging to find women in that age bracket in this industry. I can search around for you, though. Will that change the price? I can't say for sure at this point. I have your number from caller ID. Let me look into it and call you back in about an hour. Is that okay? Okay, that sounds good. Could you arrange for tonight around 7? Where were you planning to take her? I was thinking of the Black Angus. Does that sound good? That should be fine. Peterson, give me an hour. I felt a bit relieved. I hung up while Pamela and Robert would be having chicken patty parmesan. I'd be enjoying fete nan for the next hour. I went through my wardrobe I decided on a navy blazer, gray turtleneck and tan chalky pants. I wasn't sure if Richard would show up, but it was worth a try. I picked up the phone after the 3rd ring, taking my time to avoid seeming too eager. Peterson speaking. Peterson, it's Richard. I have good news. Your escort will be waiting for you outside the sheriff's office in the hotel at 7. Right, she'll be in a green dress. Does that work for you? That's perfect. I might arrive a bit early, but I'll try not to seem too eager. And how old is she, by the way? Now, Peterson, you know better than to ask a lady her age, but just so you know, your date this evening is 58. I trust she meets your standards of classiness. I'm sure you'll agree that these standards of classiness are the best. Do you have any other questions? Just one. How should I settle the payment in cash? Should I bring cash? The hours leading up to the evening flew by despite it being just dinner. I was filled with excitement. I craved the romantic ambience. There were plenty of potential dinner companions at Wagon Wheel Acres, but I didn't want to get involved with any of them. It felt wrong to engage with them, like I was condoning my wife's affair with Robert. I couldn't accept their relationship, but I felt trapped. I couldn't find a way out while still maintaining my dignity. I decided to treat myself for the evening and think about a solution later. I left home a bit earlier than usual, wanting to give my Toyota a run through the car wash. It wasn't particularly dirty, but this evening felt special. I wished I could have arrived in a more impressive vehicle, but I had to work with what I had. So I found myself torn between not wanting to arrive too early and not wanting to keep my escort waiting. I cursed my lack of experience in these matters. When she finally emerged, I felt like a nervous teenager. I knew I'd made the right choice. She exuded her dress was perfectly tailored, and she looked like a refined lady. She was stunning at 58, and for a moment I thought about going all in, but I knew I wasn't cut out for anything beyond dinner. That was my limit for the night. I pulled up to the entrance and hurried around to open the door for her. I think her name was Peterson. I said, "Richard Peterson, right?" She smiled and said, "Yes, Richard, that's right." She smiled again as I went back to the driver's seat. "I'm not sure I understand. I thought you were arranging an escort for me." That was the plan, but I had a chat with Kenneth afterwards and decided I was the best choice for tonight. "Is this a regular thing for you?" She chuckled softly. "No, not at all. In fact, it's been 6 years since I came out with a gentleman. Is that desperate?" "No, not at all. Kenneth mentioned you could use a little pick-me-up. To be honest, I hadn't had a nice evening out in ages. Now, enough business." Richard opted for a small fillet instead of the lobster. The evening unfolded. Just after dinner, we chatted for hours until the waitstaff let us know it was time to leave. She told me she'd never been married and had started the escort business in college. Over time, she'd built her own company. She seemed proud of her achievements. She said she lived near the Sheridan, but gave me a local address instead. It was a small brick house in an exclusive neighborhood. The odd thing was, there was a for sale sign in the yard, standing out among the grand residences nearby. I walked her to the front door and thought about what I should do next. What should I do next? Should I expect an invitation inside? Maybe a kiss goodbye, or perhaps a simple handshake would be enough. She quickly solved the problem with one of her charming smiles. "I hope your evening was everything you hoped for, Peterson," she said, extending her hand. I nodded, reaching for my wallet. "That'll be $300. "Please," she added. I hadn't anticipated this, but I should have now. I found myself smiling as I peeled off 3 bills from the wad of hundreds I had brought along. We were together for almost 4 hours. I pointed out, "Yes, but that was my choice, not yours. I'll only charge you for the first hour. Is that all right?" I told her it was worth twice that. She replied that it was, and then I saw her fold the bills and put them in her bra. It seemed like she was trying to catch me off guard, maybe to make me think she was going to do something unexpected. She asked again, "Are you sure?" I could sense a hint of seriousness in her tone, which intrigued me. "I had a wonderful evening. I'd do this every night if I could afford it." I said I'd love to. She laughed and said, "Why don't you come over tomorrow night around 6? I'll cook something I'd love to." I agreed, pausing before. I asked how much it would cost. $300, she replied, smiling. At that moment, she took my arm and kissed me. It caught me off guard and made the moment more exciting. The next morning at breakfast, I saw Pamela and Robert from across the room. Kenneth came over and sat with us. He hadn't eaten yet, but he still had a cup of coffee. "Peterson, my friend, how was your evening?" Kenneth asked. The others were talking about. "The table puzzle was better than I'd expected." I replied with a smile. It was way better than I'd expected, so I put my plate aside. I grabbed my coffee, and we made our way to the coffee bar. "Is that all you're going to tell me?" Kenneth was clearly curious. There's not much more to say. We had dinner, and that was it. Nothing beyond that. I didn't engage in anything more. I explained. Well then, what did you pay her for? Kenneth's bluntness caught me off guard, leaving me momentarily speechless. I was unable to provide a satisfactory response. I remained silent as we settled into the lounge area. With fresh cups of coffee, Kenneth, could you do me a favor and get me some pills? I asked, changing the subject. Sure thing, Barbara can hook you up at $20 a pop. Her annuity dried up a few years ago, but she manages to stay here by selling them. Ah, the wonders of free enterprise, I remarked. Dry, so Peterson, who did she set you up with? I feel like I know all of them by now, Kenneth asked, steering the conversation back to the previous night's events. It was clear from Kenneth's tone that he hadn't experienced an evening with Richard himself. I trusted her when she mentioned I hadn't had a client in 6 years. In fact, I found myself believing nearly everything she told me. Whether she was genuinely honest or an adept liar, the ability to deceive convincingly was undoubtedly an asset in her profession. I think her name was Karen. She had a Slavic or Russian accent. I chose not to tell the truth for some reason as we carried on chatting. Pamela and Robert strolled past, absorbed in their own world. My wife didn't look at me or acknowledge my presence. No one would have guessed we were married. I heard Kenneth laugh under his breath. He earned himself a playful jab in the ribs. Dinner with Richard was another memorable evening. She wasn't a gourmet chef, but she certainly knew her way around the kitchen. Kenneth had called earlier, insisting on being set up with Karen. Richard quickly caught on and arranged for him to. I also met one of her new recruits, an aspiring actress eager to showcase her Dr. Zago accent to poor Kenneth. I sensed that Richard appreciated my discretion in not revealing Karen's name to Kenneth. The evening ended all too soon, and as I bid her farewell, I received another kiss accompanied by the next evening. We went out for sushi. I knew what I liked to order, but she effortlessly conversed with the waiter in Japanese, showcasing yet another impressive skill. She truly was an extraordinary woman, and I found myself yearning to spend every available moment with her. However, the reality of my marriage and the recurring $300 fee loomed over me like a dark cloud. Despite our extended time together, the cost remained consistent, leaving me perplexed and reluctant to inquire further. Things reached a breaking point that weekend, when my daughter Mary paid a visit. She only made the trip 3 or 4 times a year, even though she lived just an hour away. This visit seemed different from previous ones. When she arrived, Mary bypassed our room and headed straight for the room occupied by Robert and her mother. They spent over 2 hours together, followed by an additional hour strolling the grounds, chatting and laughing. Eventually, I observed Mary checking her watch and exchanging words with her mother before departing towards the main complex building. I didn't feel inclined to engage in conversation with her at that moment, so I left the building through the back door. I watched her car leave the car park and drive back to her house. I felt a pang of sadness, realizing that my relationship with Mary might not be as strong as I had thought. Meanwhile, Pamela and Robert stayed put. I was sitting by the koi pond, lost in each other's company. That night, I found solace with Richard. I appreciated her patience in allowing me to initiate intimacy, and I was overjoyed by her enthusiastic response. I also made sure to compensate Barbara with $100. However, my elation was short-lived. I got some unwelcome news. Richard had made some big changes in her life. She not only sold her house but also offloaded her business to a group of more experienced young women who had pulled together to buy her out. Surprisingly, her college degree turned out to be an MBA. She'd been putting together a financial plan to help her make the most of her investments. As a result, she wasn't just well off, she was downright wealthy. Over the past year, she'd been overseeing the extensive refurbishment of a house she'd purchased in Merida, Mexico. Now that the renovations were complete, she was ready to make. I'd gotten to know her well enough by then to understand that she wouldn't bring up the subject herself. Despite my uncertainty about the future, I knew I had to ask Richard, "Is there any chance I could join you?" Her response came not in words but in a warm smile and an embrace. This woman had encountered countless men, yet I was surprised to find myself the one she'd chosen to stay with. I was flattered, but also a bit bewildered. I decided against asking her why, and instead chose to embrace it. "Peterson, I believe we can make this work if you're willing," she offered. "I suppose I'll need to get a divorce," I replied. "Absolutely not," I told her. "You risk losing half of everything. You've let me take care of everything. We're leaving in 10 days. Are you sure about this?" "Oh yes, absolutely," I confirmed. "Oh, by the way, where is Merida?" The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Thankfully, my passport was up to date. Richard arranged for a document allowing me to sell I got the unit at Wagon Wheel Acres back from the management. It wasn't a huge sum, but I did manage to get 80% of the original purchase price back. Richard took care of all the logistics for our move to Merida. She opened a bank account for me, which operated as Banamex. She also assured me that I have enough funds to. I was able to live comfortably, especially since I wouldn't have rent or utility expenses. I used the proceeds from selling my apartment to fund this account, along with the funds from my checking and savings accounts. My retirement package from Russell Industries included an annuity account designed to safeguard my assets. Fortunately, Richard had connections willing to purchase the annuity for a fixed sum. I remember those commercials where people shouted, "It's my money and I want it now." I was skeptical at first, but I ended up receiving 82% of the account's value while forfeiting monthly payments. I also received a substantial cash payout, depositing nearly $800. Selling my Toyota was easy and gave me some extra cash for incidental expenses. By then, Richard had set up an account for me at Banamex and Merida, so I could transfer funds from Cab Bank whenever I needed to. I also arranged for my Social Security check to be deposited automatically, which meant I had to go to the local Social Security office, but it was worth it for peace of mind. I had to go to the local Social Security office, which was a bit of a hassle, but it was worth it to have peace of mind in the final days before we left. I spent all my time at Richard's place. Kenneth told me that Pamela hadn't even noticed my absence. Of course not. I gave Kenneth my HGTV as a parting gift with my departure payments to Wagon Wheel ACR, which meant no more financial support. From now on, Robert Nelson will be paying for his lover. Merida is a challenge. It feels more like a quaint village in Spain or Italy. The homes have pastel colors and are tightly clustered together, appearing simple and unadorned from the outside, yet boasting elaborate interiors. Richard and I quickly settled into our new routine. Our new boss was a bit of a challenge. I tried to make up for the fact that I was footing all the expenses by giving her a few gifts here and there, but she wanted none of it. Everything felt great until 6 months later, when Mary showed up out of the blue. Richard was really nice about it and let my daughter move in with him while he ran some errands. I ended up stuck with my kid, even though I didn't really want to be. Mary was pretty clear about her feelings. She said, "Dad, what are you doing here? You have to come home." I didn't know what to say, so I asked her to take a seat. I said, "Can you be more specific?" She seemed even more frustrated, so I replied, "You left without a word, taking everything with you." She said, "Yeah, so what?" I was a bit nonchalant about it. Mary wanted to know what had happened to her mom. I invited her to join me, but she chose to stay with Robert. I wasn't being entirely truthful. Mary had no way of knowing if I was telling the truth or not. She was upset that I'd taken everything from our savings to her mom's retirement account. What was she supposed to do? Mary kept asking why I was there. Mary countered, "You can't just abandon her, she's your wife." Mary then brought up the last time you visited Wagon Wheel Acres before you left. "Before I left, you spent 3 hours with Robert and Mom, but none with me." Mary's tone was accusatory. "I tried to find you, but you weren't in your room." I replied defensively, "After 3 hours, was I just an afterthought, some obligation?" She replied, "Don't be dramatic. Mom was happy with Robert and wanted me to get to know him." I tried to calm things down by saying, "She was sleeping in his room with him." Mary's voice was full of frustration. "Did you know?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "She said you didn't." I'd had enough of sharing a bed with her. I admitted reluctantly, "Did you actually believe that she demanded what? Why did you bother to find me and come here? I'm not going back. I won't allow her to flaunt her infidelity in my face." It was humiliating and degrading. I don't think you need help with this. JN and I can't afford her fees at Wagon Wheel Acres anymore. Her Social Security doesn't cover half the expenses, and they won't let her stay without full payment," Mary explained, her voice softening. "What about Robert? Wasn't he supposed to help out?" I asked. "Robert Nelson was moved to the Alzheimer's wing 3 months ago. My mother can't stay in the same room, and we can't afford a separate unit." Mary revealed her tone heavy with resignation. "So you want me to give her money so she can stay close to her lover?" I asked. "Dad, she's comfortable there. She wants to stay because it's safe and familiar." Mary pleaded, "I want to be near him even if he no longer knows who I am. I won't let her use me for this," I declared firmly. "You're not being fair," Mary protested. "Why do you let her live? With you, your house is big enough." I suggested we offered, but she refused. She wants to stay at Wagon Wheel Acres. Mary admitted, sounding defeated. I got up from my chair and went to the front hallway, getting my hat from the peg by the door. I looked at Mary. She had traveled over 1,000 miles for nothing. I'd traveled over 1,000 miles for nothing. Her mother had betrayed me, and now my daughter was trying to guilt-trip me for not accepting the humiliation. I went to the market and closed the door on my way out. I knew exactly where I could find Richard. As I walked away, I realized I would never understand what drove Pamela to act as she did. But I didn't care anymore. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. If you haven't already, feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.